Hi, my name is Leanne. I'm 14, and I'm lying to my dad about my mum to help save our family. This story, or rather a whole bunch of unpleasant occasions, happened a while ago. I was living together with my mum and dad and my little brother Matthew. He's 2. And just like in any other family, my parents sometimes argued over things. They eventually always made peace after a little while, and things would go back to normal again, which always made me pretty sure that that was the normal and how marriage should be. But one day it turned out that I was terribly mistaken when I heard my mummy crying in the bathroom. It was in the middle of the day, and I was doing my homework, and my mum was busy with her chores. At some point she asked me to go look after Matthew while she was going to put a load in the washing machine. After 10 minutes, I realised that Mum still hadn't returned, so I called to her. But she didn't answer, and I decided to go and see if everything was okay with her. I found my mum crying over the laundry basket. She said that she had stubbed her toe badly, and that's why she had tears running down her face. But I felt like something else was going on that made her so upset. Just for you to understand, my mum's a very tough woman, and most of the time she keeps her emotions to herself, no matter whether these emotions are positive or negative. She never cries over, let's say, a sad film or upsetting news, and you can be sure she wouldn't just sit there and cry over a stubbed toe. Oh, by the way, I guess it's because of this that I was never really close with my mum. She always said that I had plenty of peers around me to be friends with, and she was eager to be a respected grown-up. And that's it. This pattern of my mum's character is key to this story, so keep listening. Anyway, later that day, or rather during the night, I woke up because I heard some voices. It was my parents talking loudly to each other, and judging from the few words that reached me, I figured out that my mum had found a lipstick mark on my dad's shirt while she was doing laundry. Then I understood why she was crying earlier that day. She decided that Dad was cheating on her with another woman. I got really scared. Recently, the parents of one of my classmates divorced, and I saw how hard it was for him to be forced through such serious changes in his life, and I really didn't want my family to break up. So I was just lying in my bed, trying not to move or to breathe loud enough that I wouldn't be able to hear anything else from that talk. Then I heard a rumbling sound, and a minute later Dad entered my room. It turns out that while they were arguing, Mum fainted. She immediately regained consciousness, but Dad decided to take her to the hospital just to make sure that she was all right. He needed me to be awake now to look after Matthew. I will never forget that night. I darted from one corner to another while I was waiting for my parents to return. They didn't come home until the morning. Dad was just gloomy, and Mum's face showed that she had only just stopped crying. They said that we needed to talk. It turned out that back there in the hospital, while doctors were doing all the necessary tests to figure out whether Mum got hurt when she fainted or not, they found something that shouldn't be there. This is how all of us figured out that my mum had lymphoma. Of course, everybody was shocked and devastated, and you can rest assured that Mum decided to start her treatment immediately. Dad told me that ever since then I would have to cover Mum's back with the housework, at least to some extent. But he really didn't need to say anything. I was ready to do anything to help Mum. So every day when I came home from school I had to cook, clean, wash and vacuum, and of course I tried to look after Matthew on my own, because, after the chemo, Mum didn't really feel well, and she could barely take care of herself. Mum's health condition wasn't the only thing that was different now, but also her temper. Day by day, she became totally unbearable. Anytime she heard me at home, she had something to ask me to do, like to fix her pillows or put her socks on her feet. The stuff she could really do herself. And it was not only me that she was torturing with her illness. She constantly yelled at Dad, saying that he did everything wrong. He didn't cook soup for her in the way that she told him to do it, and he didn't buy anything at the store that she asked for, and he did a crappy job of looking after me and Matthew, and so on. According to Mum, Dad actually did virtually everything wrong, and she also kept whining all the time about her health. Yes, I know my mum, the tough woman, but she was whining to everyone who ever called her to ask how she was actually doing. It's not that I'm complaining now. Believe me, I'm perfectly aware of what a torture it was for my mum to have cancer. It's just I was only 14, and I was supposed to have fun with my friends, like any other 14-year-old. But I got housework and babysitting instead, and she never even said thank you for all I was doing for her and just took it all for granted. And I couldn't say a word to Mum because she was sick, and I didn't want to make her upset. Dad, on the other hand, was the only person who could completely understand me being tired from Mum. We sometimes didn't even need to talk to each other. We could, for example, clean the kitchen together, not saying a word to each other, but I would have a feeling that I was not alone in the suffering, All I wanted to say was that during that period of time, when Mum was ill, my dad and I got really close to each other. That's probably why the thing I'll be talking about a little later turned out to be so hard for me to do. One day I had stayed up late doing my homework and decided to drink warm milk before going to bed. But as I was approaching the kitchen, I heard my dad talking on his cell phone. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but he was whispering something in the phone. It was as if he wanted to hide whatever he was saying from everybody else, so I couldn't help but tune into it. Dad noticed me almost at once and dropped the phone, like he was completely surprised. His suspicious behaviour could have only meant one thing to me, that he was having an affair and was talking to this other woman when I caught him. Honestly, I don't know what to say. I just stood there in the kitchen doorway trying to look at my dad as contemptuously as I could. How could he do this to his sick wife? Of course, he began telling me some stupid things, that this was a business call and he dropped it just because it was already over, and he just didn't expect to see me and so on. But obviously, he should have come up with a better excuse, because I looked at the clock on the wall, which showed that it was already nearly midnight, which was too late for work calls. And Dad understood that I didn't believe him. Then Dad sighed and said that we needed to talk. It was one of the most serious talks I've ever had in my life. It turned out that there really was another woman, whose name was Jessica, and who could make my dad happy. He was pretty sure of that. And that night, when the doctors found Mum's cancer, he was just about to tell Mum that he was going to leave her. But then she got sick, and he simply couldn't do it. While Jessica kept insisting on him to finally make a decision, he said he wasn't expecting for me to understand him or anything. He just wanted me to not tell my mum about this, at least until she gets well. I don't know what to do. I mean, of course I promised him that I would keep his secret for the family's sake, but later when I was already in bed, I kept thinking over that situation. At first I imagined that Mum beat her lymphoma and became healthy again. But then Dad told me about his mistress and left us, and Mum became devastated and desperate. No more happy family for any of us. But what if Mum never made it and passed away? This still didn't look like a happy family. Besides, in that case, how long would it take for Dad to bring the new Mum home? Oh, God, I wished I had never found out about all these grown-up games. The next morning, my dad was supposed to take my mum to the doctor, but he had a work call, so I insisted on accompanying her instead. Before he left for work, he gave me a meaningful look, which was supposed to remind me of what I'd promised him earlier. I thought so hard about all these family values, deceits and other things, that I didn't even notice how my mum and I even arrived at the doctor's office. As soon as we entered and saw the doctor's face, we knew that he had some great news. Mum was so lucky to have kicked cancer's butt. Of course, everyone was extremely happy, and we hugged the doctor and thanked him like 1,000,000 times. But then Mum grabbed her cell phone, intending to call my dad, and I knew this was my last chance. So I stopped her and said that we needed to talk. Not a single muscle flinched on Mum's face. She seemed to be aware of everything already, and now her suspicions had simply been confirmed. She patted me on the head. I was ready to cry over how worthless I felt at that moment. It was like I ruined the best news in the world about Mum's recovery. But then suddenly I noticed a change in Mum's face. She looked mysterious and deep in thought. Mum suddenly said that we'd better keep our little bit of good news from Dad for a while, at least until she comes up with a better plan to make him stay with the family. Was it shocking? Hell yeah, and totally unexpected. I don't know any other woman who'd be so inventive as my mum. It's been 2 weeks now that she has continued pretending to be sick, and I've continued to assist her in it, and Dad still knows nothing and keeps taking care of her. And recently Mum suggested that I seize the moment and give Dad a hint that his wife's illness could probably be God's punishment for his cheating. I don't know how long that plan will last, and what my dad's reaction will be if the truth is revealed, but I do know that I've never felt like I was that close with my mum before.
Hi, I'm Mark. I want to talk to you about bullying. When you hear the word bullying, the first thing you imagine are cruel schoolmates who make your life impossible. It's not my case. I was cool with my classmates. I have been the victim of bullying from my teacher. Can you imagine? A teacher. I have gone through a great deal of unpleasant moments, and I'd like to share with you how I managed to solve this problem. I was a senior in high school at the time. I was a solid C student in maths, having struggled through it during all my school years. I liked maths though, and I was always eager to know more. That's why I usually asked a lot of questions at the lessons. Last year, I got a new teacher, Miss Roberts, who was known as a local math genius. She was also famous as a heartless and nasty woman, but I thought this wasn't something to be worried about. Right. Anyway, I took up her classes in the hope that I can improve my maths marks, given that she was so good. First 2 lessons went alright. I was very enthusiastic, making lots of questions. Maybe somewhat dumb ones, but hey, in my understanding, any teacher would be glad to help such an interested student. Sure, it took not a long time for her to come up with phrases like, "And here comes the slow boy again. Surprise, surprise, you don't understand it again. Do we have to go extra slow for you today?" And everyone laughed. Thanks for the support, guys. For some reason, I turned out to be an authentic red flag for her. Every single lesson, I received new creative insults from Ms. Roberts. I wasn't the best one, but I wasn't the worst one either, so I never understood such a contempt from her side. You can say that I could have just taken a deep breath and kept cool for a couple of semesters. Problem is, with the damn math lessons several days a week, it was getting harder and harder to pull myself to school every day. So I tried to solve the problem on my own, trying to act very friendly and calm towards her. It backfired, and she got even fiercer. Alright, time for plan B. I decided to confront her directly, asking, "Ms. Roberts, could you stop offending me in front of the whole class?" All I got in response was, "I don't know what you're talking about. And by the way, I wouldn't expect a C in the end of the year if I were you." That required extreme measures. I went to our principal with my problem, and he sent someone in to examine her during class. She acted respectful and normal for 1 day, and then went back to bullying me with twice the enthusiasm. That was enough. I went to the local Radio Shack, bought a recorder, and secretly taped every insult she threw at me for the rest of the school year. One day, I asked her a question during class. Her response till now is burnt into my brain. "I've been teaching for over 10 years, and that was the single dumbest question I've ever heard from anyone." She continued the lesson without answering. I calmly stood up, packed my stuff, and headed to the nurse's office to dismiss myself from school. I went home and compiled all of my brutal tapes into one glorious masterpiece. Next day, I went to the principal, and we listened to a couple of the insults until he stopped me. He wanted more witnesses present, as well as Ms. Roberts. So he collected board directors, the local school police officer, the vice principal, and Ms. Roberts herself. What followed were some of the greatest minutes of my life. I watched as the administrators went from fed up with being in another useless meeting to furious and speechless, with some of them keeping their mouths open for the duration of the tape. I also watched Ms. Roberts go from confident and stuck up to her realizing how much she had screwed herself up. She was publicly roasting herself in front of the most important people from the district. The tape finished, the administrators look around in astonishment, and I am asked to leave the room. The final time I saw Ms. Roberts was her, all strange, leaving the boardroom. I looked back, and we made eye contact as I gave the biggest, most evil smile. After that, Ms. Roberts was nowhere to be seen. The news spread quickly throughout the school, and I was seen as a saint by everyone. I heard that not only was she fired, but also no school district in the area would hire this outstanding educator. I was satisfied, and not only for myself. Now, I knew that that woman wouldn't poison any other student's life, at least for the time being. If you're watching this, Ms. Roberts, I would take this moment to tell you I hope you will never teach again. On the other hand, some time has passed and I've cooled down, so I hope that you have learned your lesson and have found some job outside education where you are not bullying anyone.